Monitor legislation is compliance software for a specific operational decision. Continuously tracks legislative pipelines and regulatory updates across jurisdictions to identify early signals of change. This video explains what the tool does, why the workflow matters, and how the output becomes useful decision evidence. The problem is that compliance teams often manage this workflow with scattered inputs, inconsistent review rules, and manual interpretation. At quarantadue.ai, every MCP workflow starts from the real tool interface, not from a generic prompt. The goal is simple. Keep the expert in control while the system structures the evidence. Inputs, reasoning, and outputs stay connected in one reviewable flow. Now the results become easier to compare, easier to review, and easier to explain. Monitor legislation narrows that process into a repeatable model so teams can compare cases without rebuilding the logic each time. Monitor legislation starts with a defined input contract. Typical inputs include number of jurisdictions, active legislative bills, average time to enactment, high-impact legislation ratio, and team monitoring capacity. Keeping these fields explicit reduces ambiguity and makes every run easier to audit. The workflow then applies calculate the regulatory change velocity score based on the volume of active legislation and average time to enactment, normalized to a 0-100 scale where higher values indicate faster regulatory change. Calculate the compliance coverage gap by comparing the percentage of high-impact legislation to the team's monitoring capacity, ensuring the result is never negative. Calculate budget adequacy score by comparing available compliance budget to estimated implementation costs based on high-impact legislation volume, normalized to a 0-100 scale. Calculate the overall monitoring priority index by combining change velocity, compliance gap, and jurisdiction count into a single prioritized score from 1 to 10, and calculate recommended budget allocation for monitoring activities based on priority index and available compliance budget. This keeps the process deterministic, reviewable, and aligned with how compliance teams actually make decisions. Monitor legislation returns structured outputs such as monitoring priority index, regulatory change velocity, compliance coverage gap, budget adequacy score, and compliance budget allocation analysis. These outputs are designed to support review, reporting, comparison, and follow-up actions. The value of monitor legislation is not just automation, it is a controlled way to turn repeated compliance work into a documented business process with clear inputs, transparent logic, and reusable outputs.